Hello, good evening, everybody. I'd like you to welcome you to our webinar on cattle health and housing. Tonight we've got two excellent speakers, one all the way from Scotland and one a little closer in from Montgomery. Jamie will kick off talking about housing design and how that can impact on animal health, and he'll be followed by Oli Hodgkinson, who will be discussing more the animal health aspects of housing cattle at this time of year. If you'd like to ask any questions, please do so in the chat, and then we'll pick up on the live Q&A session after both of our speakers have finished. I hope some of you will have taken part in the polls that we had just ahead of the webinar, and we'll just turn now, just before we go, to Jamie Robertson, who is our speaker, as I said, from Scotland, who's a leading specialist in this field. We'll just go to the polls and then I'll hand over to Jamie to begin his presentation. Okay, well, the questions we were asking were, what are the main housing issues for you relating to health? So is it hard to clean, low or high temperatures, different ages of stock in the same building, poor ventilation, or lack of appropriate space? So it's a way to think about the kind of things you might think about when you're looking at housing. And our second poll was, what are the main housing issues for you on your farm? So is it lack of space, difficult to access, ability to move livestock, ventilation, or the challenges of labour efficiency? So I think we may just go on to Jamie's presentation.
I may be reluctant to give it a try, but possibly will we go in from my screen, Heather?
I think Larry will be. Here we go. Here we go. Right, Jamie, over to you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, everybody. Yeah, this is it's a lot easier travelling all the way from Aberdeen down to beautiful Wales to do this than it is to do it electronically, but hey ho. Thank you for inviting me. Off we go in, getting it right. If we just move on to the next slide, then what we're looking for is, in my experience, is that we're not always looking in the right place, and the challenge is to provide the correct diagnosis about what's wrong with the building in front of you. We're not talking about new builds today. And for me, it always is the case. It doesn't matter what it looks like. I'm always interested in animal behavior. And I would be asking people or the vets, how do the animals react within this building space when it's windy, when it's dry, when it's cold, when it's hot? Because all that tells us something about the way the building's interacting with the animals. Also, whilst we're looking at the building, actually, I want to know about the longer term issues. What are the poor performance and health issues? Because that kind of leads us down to the fact that it might be related to the feed space, or because a problem only kicks in after a certain series of events have happened. So these are absolutely fundamental. And what I like about them is I can use them with pig systems, poultry systems, dairy systems, feed systems. It doesn't matter. I'm always looking for the evidence or information, I should say, that will give me a clue as to what's going on. Links to climate, an absolute no-brainer here. It kind of irritated me a long time ago when I started this game that sort of pneumonia always kicks off, in the autumn when you shove all the animals in the building and it's damp and misty. And I thought, these climate relationships are very important to some of the ill health. And it also gives us the idea that if buildings struggle in the new year or in March, again, that will give us some ideas of what the problems might be. I'm looking for durable solutions, so we don't live in a gold-plated world. And I think as well that whether you need a solution for this week or this weekend in the face of a pneumonia outbreak, or whether you're looking to get through to next spring, next summer, so that you can maybe do something then, or whether you're looking at a 5-year plan, I think, again, all the time, you're looking for an element of realism, and that allows you to prioritize actions and always talk money. We've got some money to spend here, people, and you don't want to, but in fact, the losses are too high. And we're losing money at the moment by getting things wrong. So we'll move on again. But anyway, Larry, the next slide. what I'm onto here is, of course, there's a lot of differences going on. So if I just stick to the beef, you know, okay, there's a black and whites in the picture, but we're running systems, you know, with adult cattle. Quite often the problem is they're getting too hot, you know, and even you get a warm day in the spring and you're wanting cows to go, or beef animals to go at 1.5, 1.8 kilograms a day. You know, they're chucking out some heat and they can get too hot. And if they get too hot, then they'll overload on the water system and they'll eat less and they'll grow less. We really need to sort of get our heads around some of this stuff. And obviously cold calves, an issue close to my heart. And we're doing this perhaps in the same building. So we must define the problem variables. And this comes down very sweetly, Larry, if you move it all on, is to 5 issues. So when you look at the building situation that you have in front of you for adult cattle, young cattle, it might well be nothing to do with the environment. It might be, you know, a serious pathogen that's arrived on the farm for which you have no protection. There might be a problem with the hygiene. There might be issues in the silage clamp. It doesn't matter. But as far as the environment as sort of mediated by the building, I'm looking for these 5 things every time. And if they're all okay when we check them out, the chances are the building is not causing you your problem. So I'm going hygiene, moisture, fresh air, airspeed, and temperature. And there are other issues. We can get more fancy, but in 15 minutes, you're not going to allow me to do that, as we could talk about the amount of light, various other bits and bobs. But the thing here is hygiene, moisture, fresh air, airspeed, and temperature. And it's all 5, because if any one of those is out of place, it actually upsets the apple cart. And, you know, it's unlikely that you can walk away from a situation saying, well, yeah, now I think about it, the airspeed in here is pretty high for a 5-day-old calf or a bunch of calves that are you still on milk. That's the issue. It's not the nutrition. So we chop these all up and we look at them one by one. So the first one, Larry, is moisture. And I'm kind of sorry, hygiene. Sorry, hygiene. Scours, serious issue. First 4 weeks of life, #1 problem throughout the UK and Ireland. And I'm saying hygiene. I think there's a relationship with scours that we really should stop ignoring. I think that we pussyfoot around the subject of hygiene, and over the last 2-3 years, I would be normally doing it this winter, but I'll ask groups of farmers how often they have a dialogue with their vet about how to clean stuff. And then maybe the next day I have a dialogue with vets about X, Y, and Z, and I'll ask them exactly the same question. And the revelation to me over the last 2 years, I'm finding very few people are having professional conversations about how to clean stuff. We're seriously missing a trick, and there's quite a lot we can do about it quite quickly. So the kind of things that are an issue, do you know you're using the right disinfectant? Are you using it properly? And I'm looking at calving and calf pens, and I'm sorry, people, we're looking at a hell of a mess there. Feeding equipment, you don't want to know the data we're coming out of there. Milk, of course, is a beautiful nutritional product, but it gets pretty rank pretty quick. And if scour is the problem and we don't clean feeding equipment more than once a week, funnily enough, I think we should change our behavior a little bit. So if we move it on again, Lowry. So I'm sort of saying that as far as hygiene is concerned, if it's, I looked at the really good project that Owen Atkinson managed for you lovely Welsh people, and we're saying that scours, 25% of calves are treated for scour. There's vaccination kicking around, and it's a heavy issue. So know the pathogens. I'm very surprised again that quite a lot of people don't seem to realize that if you don't remove all the organic debris out of a pen and then start throwing organic matter, disinfectant around, it cannot work according to the sort of specification on the label. You have to get rid of the organic matter before you start throwing disinfectant around. And that requires you to get off the machinery. You know, there might be a requirement for detergent. So if buildings are only cleaned once or twice, we probably should be using detergents or steam cleaners to get the biofilm off. And all this is turning into, do we have enough facilities or adequate facilities? Do we have enough time to let the thing dry? Do we have enough drainage? So you want me to talk about buildings, but hygiene is an area where we are, I think it's not so much that people aren't working hard on hygiene. I think that actually we need to up the game and be more realistic about our ability to do it. And to say we don't have enough time to wash things properly and then worry about scours is the cart before the horse. So if you move it on, Larry, I think we need to rack up what we can do. Moisture, here it comes again. You little graph down the bottom there, and I've used some slides from overseas, so perhaps kind of look at these things. I think it's quite useful with you to send you back to your own buildings to look again. But moisture, it comes from the animals, and it comes in large quantities. So you know, we just have a calf, you know, maybe producing 5 liters of moisture a day. You know, on the graph there I've said 7, but that's quite a lot. But your middle time, so you know, 5 liters a day, 20 calves in a pen, there's 100 liters a day. There's 700 liters a week going into one pen. 700 liters a week going into a pen of 20 calves. And funny enough, if they're in there for 10 weeks, that is 10 tons of water into one pen, and you wonder why you're using a lot of straw, why there's shite all over the place, and the front of the pen is soaking. So if you move it on, Larry, then I see, let's do the basics. If the floor doesn't work today, it's never going to work, ever. So we need to start mashing things up a bit. We need drainage. We need to cut holes in floors and provide drainage. And if you think that sounds stupid, well, sorry, I get people to do it, and it does work. You know, so the dry bed for young stock is an absolute key issue. But I am aware straw is expensive. But if the floors don't work, they're never going to work. If there's water leaking around the place from drinker systems, you know, for young stock, for me, the target is dryness, and we really need to move the job on. So just do the best you can. But there's a quick one here. Whilst we're on moisture and buildings, next slide, please, Larry. I'm afraid, again, we're looking at something I've kind of ignored for a long time, but we're starting to get more data here. Do remember the other side of the equation. We have a lot of potential to help our stock grow better and easier by paying more attention to water, looking at access, water quality, spillage, and hygiene again. It's not on the slides here, but we're analysing some stuff from 93 calf houses in Northern Ireland, you know, and 90% of the water samples we've taken there are really over spec, over guidance in terms of hygiene. And part of that is because we don't have the facilities to provide calves with, or young stock with, clean water. So next slide, Larry. You know, so it's very much a matter of, you know, you might think I'm taking the mickey there, but you know, look at that. 20% of livestock borehole samples were above the relevant recommended limits for livestock, for nitrogen and for sulfates. And so, whilst we might be interested about the site, you know, the walls on the roof and everything else, just in passing, I think we've been ignoring the issue of water. Some people are doing a fabulous job, and my experience is that people that rack up, you know, and provision of good quality water for their growing and adult cattle, they say they feel a bit of an improvement. Moving on to fresh air, Lowry, the next one, very pertinent for this year. The thing about we talk about ventilation, but the thing to question is, do we have enough fresh air through the building? And the reason for this is that fresh air, yes, it removes all the moisture and the heat and the rubbish that is in floating around in the air. But I just add this one slide here for you to get across to you work done by Christopher Cox. This is absolutely for real, that when a viral or bacterial particle goes floating out in the fresh air. It does not last forever, but it can last for quite a long time. So the graph on the left-hand side there, the dotted line is showing you the decline. This is the survival of a virus in the air, and within 6 minutes, if you can point to that bit there, Larry, down the bottom, in 6 minutes down that dotted line, the whole population is dead of a virus free floating in the air. Whereas the solid line higher up, it starts off with 100% viability, and you can see that within 6 minutes, there's 85% of the population of those viruses are still alive. And the ballpark thing to take away in your head is that fresh air will kill airborne viruses 10 to 20 times faster than 50% fresh air. It's in the mass. So there's a lot of science behind it, but really for ventilation, the thing in terms of assessment is, do we have it throughout the building? So next slide, please, Larry. Is wind able to provide ventilation throughout the building? If it can only do half a building, funny enough, the back half of the building is going to be a bit of a bomb site. The ventilation's compromised. And the other one is, it's very common, is ventilation compromised when wind changes direction? So moving on again, Larry, these are just very, very basic things. You need a hole in the roof to let the stale air out in those October days when you've got nice growing cattle, but it gets very sort of rank inside. There's a quick formula coming up for that. It's very, very simple, but there are numbers here. We do not need to guess about these things. I talk about the total area of outlet in the roof. Is it sufficient for the number of weight and animals? And from that, we derive the inlet areas. And so you can stand in the building and go, poof, I've got 60 cattle in here. I need 0.1 square meters of hole in the roof. So I need 6 square meters of hole in the roof so it ventilates when it gets warm. I look up at the ceiling and I find I've either got none or I've got 3. This is an objective way of assessing what's going on. The inlet, if we move on, Lowry, is around the side. That actually, it's the wind that ventilates our buildings most of the time. The wind blows 90% of the time. And so what we put on the sidewalls is very important. If you put solid green tin, funnily enough, you don't get any fresh air through it. You just create a bit of a draft somewhere else. So the design of cladding is quite important. And I know Farming Connect has done some work on this, on publications available to you. But you move it on. And basically, if I was in Wales, the next slide, what you need to bring in more is Yorkshire board. Yorkshire board is where you have 2 lines of boards. If Larry can move that on. 2 lines of board. It lets plenty of air through, but it slows down the air speed and it stops the rain coming in, which of course, again, your wet and windy climates. So a tight building is actually a dangerous building because it doesn't produce a lot of fresh air. Penultimate slide here. If you move on, Larry, is what we stick on the roof. Those things on the right-hand side called crank crown ridges are murder. I'll fight them in a court of law. They're useless things for livestock, but it's what builders will try and sell you and put in your building and tell you it's a ventilated ridge. What you need is on the left-hand side there. That's called an upstand. So the top right-hand corner is a cross section. And what you need, as I said, specific areas. And it's absolutely fabulous that, if you've got a good number of stock in a building and you take off those things on the right hand side and put on the thing on that you're looking at 5% increase in daily live weight gain. 5% increase in daily live weight gain. And you sort of say, well, it's going to cost me, maybe it's going to cost me £50 a linear meter to sort my building out. My building's 30 meters long. That's 1,500 quid. And I'm saying, yeah, I understand that, it's 1,500 quid, but how about 5% increase in daily live weight gain? Do the maths, sort the buildings out. So I realize it's a ridiculous high-speed run through the issues there. There are, next slide please, Larry, other very important issues in terms of sort of functionality of the building. So, the feed face, yeah, you can build a feed space with a scaffolding bar and a scaffolding board, but you won't necessarily allow all your cattle to sort of have the same amount of feeding, and certainly in terms of health and safety, it won't be so good. So the last slide, I just apologise, I've just rammed through that. But the point is to take away from this the thing that in terms of design for purpose, you walk into a space, it could be yours, it could be mine, it could be your neighbour's. There's only 5 things I'm going to check out. Hygiene, and a lot of that's to do with, is stuff actually cleanable? A lot of old young stock facilities, really, they're not really cleanable. And I think if we're honest to ourselves, then we've set ourselves a target is really too difficult. Airspeed, we need air movement, we don't need a draft. Because if we don't have air movement, we obviously don't have fresh air. We need better control of moisture and at least recognise the role of temperature, especially for young stock. So I'll leave that there, Larry, and pass on, and then we get into the question and answers after Oliver. Is that correct?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Jamie. That was excellent. Great to have simple solutions but based on science, and also to recognise the importance of the link between the farmer and the vet and other consultants, which leads us nicely on to Ollie, who has been working on our Stock Plus project in Montgomeryshire with beef and sheep farmers. And if Ollie's okay to share his slide.
Why is it not working? Shit.
And interestingly, Jamie, the poll ahead of this webinar showed that the 2 things that came out were high temperatures and being hard to clean, which you addressed beautifully for us. So, yeah, thank you very much. You obviously predicted what the issues would be. And it was great to have some good practical examples.
Cool.
While Ollie sorts himself out, we have had one question in, Jamie, that would be one for you. It said, I'm currently considering building a new cattle shed with loose house finishing cattle. I'm not sure to opt for sidewalls as Yorkshire boarding or vented sheets. What would you recommend? Did you hear that okay?
Yes, I did. So I've unmuted it. Yeah, it depends. If you're talking about very small animals and you're not going to leave them there over about 100 kilos, then maybe vented sheet would be enough. On the whole, vented sheet that's 4.5%, no. It looks great, but it doesn't let enough air through. The great value of Yorkshire board is that you can be comfortable to have quite a lot of fresh air coming through, but without the draft. So my answer would be, if it's only going to be for young stock, as in up to say 10 weeks of age, and the numbers are quite small, you can run with vent air sheeting. But otherwise, Yorkshire board. And use Yorkshire board with a smaller gap if it's for younger animal. 6-inch board with maybe just a 1-inch gap.
I think Ollie's just sorting out his audio.
Hello. Is it not sharing? Heather, is it not sharing? It is.
Yeah.
All right, application window.
Yeah, sharing now.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. From beginning. Is it? Can everyone see my screen now? Is that right, Heather?
We can see you and hear you, so brilliant. Fire away. Thank you.
Lovely. Great. Thank you very much indeed. So, yeah, this is a very, very quick whistle-stop tour through Are Your Cattle Ready for Housing? Which, for some of you, this might be a little bit late because, housing's already happened. But with this relatively nice, mild weather that we're getting and the price of straw, then a lot of people still haven't housed their cattle at all. So what are the main diseases we're worried about? Well, we've got pneumonia, liver fluke, and worms or parasitic gastroenteritis. Well, the estimated cost of pneumonia to a UK farmer is about £600 million a year. So what? Well, this basically means in an outbreak on a dairy farm, it's £43 per dairy animal. And on a beef farm, it's about £82 per beef calf. So why? Well, for a start, the cost of treatment. We've got deaths as well, reduced live weight gain, which is really important, reduced productivity through life. We can all think of those cows that end up as very poor doers, and also the extra time that it takes to deal with the problem. So this heifer here, she was one of a group who had pneumonia as a calf. She dropped down dead 6 months later. She was thin, but there were no obvious signs of pneumonia through the summer. And I said to the farmer, I'm sure this thin heifer is going to be pneumonia. He said, no, don't be stupid, don't be stupid. I opened her up, and this was an example of the lungs that we found. And as you can see, you know, we're all going on about reducing the antibiotic usage, and farmers are coming back, oh, the antibiotics just don't work. Well, to be honest, it'd take a nuclear bomb to try and remove the bacteria in these lungs. Nothing is going to penetrate these lungs. So prevention is far, far better than cure. So how are we going to control pneumonia this season? We've got management, we've got the ventilation, which Jamie's just gone on about as well, and we've got other diseases. So I'm very pleased to say that my first slide with regards to reducing the bugs that our calves are picking up shows just what Jamie was talking about. Look at the hygiene in there. Yeah, we've got the milking machine. She's filthy. Imagine taking your first drink and basically it's covered in poo. It's not really very conducive to setting up good life expectancy. Now, these guys are very immunocompromised when they're born, yeah? And the first thing they're coming across is loads and loads of poo. Think about your calving pens, you know? A lot of the beef farms I go on to, they've also got the chicken sheds. I mean, one dream of putting chickens batches upon batches upon batches. So why are we doing it with the calves, you know? Yeah, we're overpowering their immune systems, and it doesn't give them a good start in life. This is good. Yep, getting colostrum in. Again, why do we battle to get good colostrum? Colostrum is free. Yeah, it's a heck of a lot easier as well to get good colostrum. So it's free. Let's get it into our calves. 6 pints in the first 6 hours of life and 6 litres in the first 24 hours. Yeah, and of course, this is a dairy calf and we're tubing them. But again, with the beef animals, it's just as important. Yeah, we don't know how much our beef animals are going to be getting. So actually call your vet out. Use the Stoc Plus money. Yeah, use the Farming Connect money. This is all part of your single farm payment that you're no longer receiving. So make the most of them. Call the vet out. Let's take some blood samples. As you can see, I took 10 blood samples from this, from 10 calves, and the range should be greater than 20. Sorry, the numbers should be greater than 20. Whereas actually out of these 20, only 4 were any good at all. And actually that one was only just getting over the limit there, you know? So yeah, why is the colostrum not good enough? We need to look into this. Again, use your Stoc Plus, use your Farming Connect money. Again, don't do stressful things at housing. Yeah, do them before you house them. Let's disbud, let's castrate prior to housing. All of these things will affect your calves. They'll hit your live weight gain. So do it before, so that then when they come in, they're settled. And other diseases as well, they're really important. And you might ask, why have I got a picture of 4 perfectly healthy calves there? Well, the farmer assures me that up to, a month later, all 4 of these calves were dead, because they were all BVD PIs. Yeah. Again, in Wales, we've got this fantastic scheme that doesn't cost anybody a dot. Yeah. Where we should all be knowing the status of our farms. Yeah. So use that money. If they get your vet on the farm, let's check, do the young stop bleed. If they're coming back positive, then that triggers £1,000 then to find PIs on your farm. You know, everybody should be doing this. And other diseases out there as well. PI3, RSV, the commonest viruses that cause pneumonia in calves. Are they affecting your farm? Use Stoc Plus money. Use Farming Connect money. Let's take some bloods from the calves and let's find out whether these are the bugs that are causing problems on your farm. If they are, then we can get a vaccination. Yeah, there's lots of different vaccines out there. It's a bit of a minefield. A lot of them, you know, we've got 2 vaccines that are just made by different companies, and they are doing the same thing. Talk to your vet. That's what we're here for. Talk to them. Let's tailor a vaccination plan for your specific farm. So then moving away from pneumonia, well, that's liver fluke. This is a lovely liver here, and actually it's a blood clot. Here, what actually has happened is the liver fluke has left the gut, gone across the abdomen and hit that liver. If it hits the liver near a blood vessel, well, they'll bleed to death and die. Hence, we get acute fluke. Again, another example here. We've got a liver here, and we've got scar tissue from, again, where the liver, the fluke has hit the liver and caused lots of little bleeds. And it's not always thin animals as well. As you can see here, this animal was actually very, very fat, and I couldn't believe when I opened it up, I found fluke floating around there. So when we get these animals in, then we need to prevent liver fluke from developing. And there's lots of different treatments out there. One of the main treatments I find a lot of people use is closamectin, because it's easy. We're all pouring on the back. Yeah, but actually, what's the point in doing it 2 weeks post-calving? Because actually, when there's 2 weeks post-calving, then some of your cattle might have only just picked up liver fluke. So actually, we're only here. And we only get 50% efficacy of these drugs at 7 weeks of age. So actually, you shouldn't be treating them till they've been in the house for about 10 weeks. Yeah? Whereas Endofluke, Fasinex, then actually we've got 90% after 2 weeks. So again, talk to your vet about which product is best in your situation. How are we going to diagnose if you've got a fluke problem? Don't just automatically assume, because A, that's costing you money using this medication, and B, we're getting quite a lot of resistance out there, far more in the sheep. But, you know, if we're getting it in the sheep, we will eventually get it in the cattle. So let's try and save these medicines if you don't have to use them. So let's weigh them. Let's find out what your live weight gain is. And also, let's do fecal egg counts. Collect us fresh poo when these animals are housed. Let's see if there's any sign of eggs. Or actually, my favourite, again, using Farming Connect and Stoc Plus money, is actually taking blood samples from the cattle. Yeah, we take them from 10 thinner cows or 10 thinner young stock, and we send them off to find out if there's any evidence of antibodies to fluke. If there's no evidence of antibodies to fluke, then that's not the problem. Again, with worms, then this is only a young stock problem generally. Yeah, we don't need to be worming older, fatter cows, unless, of course, they're coughing. Yeah, if they're coughing, that's a different kettle of fish. So, you know, round about the autumn time, if we hear a lot of coughing cows, then actually, yes, they probably do need worming. Generally, adult cows don't need worming. But how are we going to diagnose whether our young stock do need worming? Then bring us poo samples. Yeah. After they've been housed, let them settle down, and then bring us 10 poo samples from 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds. We can look under the microscope and see if there is any evidence of worm eggs there. Again, another really good way is let's find out what the live weight gains on these animals are. And if they're not getting the sort of 1 kilo, 1.5 kilos a day, then we want to know why. And we want to be looking, we want to be investigating it further with poo. Again, this is what all this Stoc Plus money's for. It's what we're using a lot of it to actually just try and improve efficiencies on farms. We all know the margins are going. So those small saves are actually going to be helping everybody make more money. And finally, let's rotate the wormers as well. Yeah, it's very, very easy to use the Enovexes because a lot of these porons are ivermectin based. So a lot of people are just using the ivermectin because it's easy. But actually, as we know, we've got triple resistance now occurring in the sheep, and it won't be long in the cattle. We've been very, very complacent. So actually, if you've got them down the race, then and you're TB testing them, for instance, then we've got them held nicely in the crush. Use a different product, i.e. a levamisole or a white drench, but they're both drenches. Lovely. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry that was such a whistle-stop tour there.
Ollie, thank you very much. That was excellent. It was a very good whistle-stop tour and actually highlighted the importance of talking to your vet and planning, animal health planning, not just a plan. So that was ideal. We've got 1 or 2 questions coming in. In terms of scours, for example, I think you've both mentioned about the importance of hygiene. Another key one that we're all aware of is the value of colostrum. Is there any way we can assess colostrum quality or quantity? How would we go about making sure and ensuring that young calves have adequate colostrum?
Again, I would say it was more, let's take the blood samples. So basically we were taking blood samples from calves that are under 10 days of age. And if they're coming back fine, then we're not worried. But if they aren't coming back fine, then we need to be looking into why they're not coming back. And so with the beef animal, then we need to be looking at the cows. We need to be looking at her dry cow diet. That would be the main reason. You know, it might be you've got one cow that's not producing enough milk. So in that case, that calf would be lower, but the others hopefully would be fine. If across the board they're low, then we know it's your dry cow diet.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. We'll stay on the animal health theme just for one more question. You mentioned about testing for liver fluke and fecal egg counting. There's a question here about when should they be doing that when you're talking about cattle that have just been housed.
Again, it doesn't really matter to me. It's sort of the sooner the better post housing, especially with antibodies, because the antibodies, they'll last for about 3 months roughly after an animal has come across fluke. So the sooner the better, because basically you don't want that fluke sort of using any energy that could be used for putting on weight in the animal. So actually, let's do them sooner rather than later, so then we can develop a plan and medicate if required. But also, we should be also trying, if we can, to think, you know, if they come back positive, then this is the time to have the dialogue with the farmer and find out which fields these cattle were on. Yeah, and then we should be able to start to map the high fluke risk fields, so that maybe we can try and do something about it rather than just relying constantly on this medication that's quietly getting far more inefficient.
Oh, okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. That's ideal. And thanks also for your reference to encouraging everyone to take advantage of diagnostic testing. Those farmers that are listening in who are on Stoc Plus all have a budget available as part of their linked to their priorities and recommendations that have been set through the project. But so, you know, the importance of using diagnostic tests strategically is you've highlighted very well for us. Thank you. Moving across to Jamie, we're all aware that another question that's come in. We're all aware that straw is really expensive. Have you got any suggestions for any other alternative beddings that would help to keep animals clean, or any other methods of floor management?
Yeah, I'm interested in what people might have locally that can be used. Probably as something to put under straw. The target is you can use rolled up £20 notes. They're quite useful because the point is, from a technological aspect, all I want is the interface between the calf and the whatever it's lying on to be dry. So a couple of years ago, nightmares up here in Scotland. So people were baling rushes. I know that unfortunately there's a lot more rushes about. No, this is, you were saying that's pretty rough, but no. If you bale the rushes and put them down to form the base of the bedding and then put better material on top. Some people, again, depends what they have available locally, will use sand. Again, you wouldn't recommend sand as a bedding on its own, but sand as something to prolong the life of the materials that you have. Yeah. I also think there's a couple of things that go on here. People say the buildings are overstocked, whereas actually quite often what's going on is the buildings aren't working properly. And if you actually do the numbers, it's quite a useful thing for the vets to do. But I mean, it's quite simply, if you've got young stock and they're not doing well, but they have more than 2 square meters per animal, then there's something wrong with the system. 2 square meters of a reasonable environment is perfectly adequate for an animal up to 120 kilos or so. And that's exactly the same for adult stock as well. So, I think we can see ourselves, it's almost like doing a diagnostic thing, that if you got, if you need a lot of space, you've got to ask yourself why. And too much space is expensive in straw. So, you know, I think that actually I'm moving then. So that's what goes on the floor. And then you come to, I'm sorry, but the ventilation. It is absolutely stunning that if you put, I can think of a 60 calf building, brand new, what would be 60 foot long. He changed the ridge, and within 3 days of putting a ridge with upstands on top, he saw the floor drying up. That is the power of ventilation. It just, it's a huge amount of air going through a building, and whilst it might be wet outside, when it stops raining, it's going to be drier air than it is inside the building if it doesn't ventilate well. So it's an absolutely key issue to get that right. And then the final one, which is not for now, but is for next summer. If the floor doesn't work, it is never going to work until you change the floor. End of story.
Okay, that brings me very nicely on to the next one, which is, you know, if you're thinking about checking your ventilation or you think something's not quite right, do you recommend the use of these smoke bombs, or do you have other methods, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, I do. Well, my first suggestion is to sort of just, before you get the smoke out, is just to sort of look at the building and say, actually, is it possible for this to ventilate properly? Wind ventilates our buildings when the wind is moving. If your building is next to a silage pit, there's not a lot of wind gets through a silage pit. So I can look at the rectangular building, and we can too, and look at it and go, well, for example, if I was looking for mastitis in dairy cows, then I know exactly, given a rectangular building, with one long wall built beside a silage pit, I know I'd have a race with Oliver of see who could find, the most pathogens the quickest, because I would just go to the place that is least ventilated. So do that first. I think there's another thing that if you go back to, well, actually, unfortunately, modern buildings as well, but a lot of buildings were built with their, if you like, the gable end into the southwest and west, for the reasons of protection, because we don't want the rain or the wind inside the buildings. But of course, what you're also doing when you have a gable end, especially you have a gable end next to another gable end, next to another gable end, a very sort of common, that's not design, that's called shoving buildings up. There's no design in there at all. But you end up with, if you like, these solid gable ends are facing free fresh air delivery for 50-60% of the time of the year. Aha! You could let that stuff in for free, but you don't want to lose control of air speed or moisture ingress. If you stick up spaceboard, then the wind will drive the rain 20 foot into the shed. Damp straw again. But if you can keep the rain out and let the air in, you will dry the inside of the building. So we do all that. The hole in the roof is really only important for 5% of the year, maybe, or slightly more important when the building's next to a building next to another building, and that extraction out of the ridge becomes very important. Once you've done all that, I'm with you all the way, Heather. Buy some smoke bombs at local plumbers merchants, and let them go. And we can learn 3 things from letting off smoke. One is 4 things. One is they're not really very big, but never mind, they're what we've got. The second thing we learn is check out, obviously, how long it takes the smoke to disperse. And if it's sort of heading for 45 seconds, 50 seconds, then it's moving too slowly. You've got a build-up of air, and therefore the bacteria and viruses in the air probably. The other, and it's very useful to use it at animal height. So if you got beef units with creep areas for the calves to go and lie in, check the creep area down at animal height, because if the smoke hangs around in there, then that's fine as long as the whole herd is healthy. But of course, once one calf starts spouting a bit of PI3 or something, then they're all in together in a nice cozy place with no fresh air. That's how we spread diseases. The other thing you can do with a smoke bomb is let it off and see where the smoke goes to. Yeah, it's a great trick. Do it in the heifer shed and find, or the collecting yard, and find all this. I call it, it's a organic vaccination point. Where 200 dairy cows stand for 3 hours a day next to a young stock and just sort of spread pathogens all over them. So there's three things. You can work out whether it's too slow. You can work out where it's elevated airspeed. Don't back off from elevated airspeed, because airspeed's actually the hardest in terms of of physiological impact. It's harder than moisture and it's harder than temperature because it hits very, very quickly. So I realize you were saying your high temperatures are an issue, but come the winter, you can slow down the growth on quite big cattle by putting them in an area with too much fresh air. So if it all blows away, it's too windy.
Thank you, great answer. There's just another question come in the chat actually. Somebody's just asking, what is the advantage of an upstand ridge compared to an open gap right along the shed roof?
I'll go. The opening all along the shed roof, that is like the solution in an outbreak right now. Let's get it up there. Roof work is very dangerous. Serious comment, you know, you fall off a roof, you're dead. Doesn't work. You know, we must be, you know, in agriculture, you have shocking statistics on health and safety. So I'll just be brutal on that one. But yeah, so if you take off a ridge, as long as you got a decent sort of amount of body weight of cattle in there, you know, you're going to let the air out. And it's, I guess, particularly valuable where you can't get the air in through a sidewall so easily. So that's quite cute. But what you're missing is this. There's two things. The first thing is, you know, it's 0.2 meters wide. You know, what's that? 8 inches wide, and that's cute. 0.2 inches wide, 25 meters long. I can only do this in meters. You know, 0.2 times 25, Ollie, help me out here, is 5 square meters. I've got 5 square meters of hole in the roof, and funny enough, you know, if I have a meter rainfall a year, I've got 5 ton of water coming in. It's not a lot compared to the 5 ton of urine that might be produced by the cattle inside the building every day. So from that point of view, get the hole in the roof. However, when you buy and spend the money on putting upstands on, what you get is absolute peachiness, because the wind blows for 90% of the time. And unlike the wall that might be less next to a silage pit or another building and no fresh air getting in, tops of the roofs are out there in the wind. You know, that whichever direction the wind comes from, the wind's rolling over these roofs, and it rolls up the roof and it hits the upstand and accelerates to get over that upstand and creates a negative pressure in the roof. It sucks, and it does it for free. And so again, I think that where we're paying a lot of money for straw, especially say you know, sometimes parts of the year where we actually don't have a lot of cattle in the straw court, you know, we'll see that with dry cow accommodation, for example. Then the thing about it is that maybe there's not a lot of energy being in there to create a stack effect. It's massively important for young stock because they don't create a stack effect. You put on the upstands, you get a negative pressure in the ridge for 90% of the time. That's the difference. So number one, yep, go for the hole, but invest in the upstand and you'll get less water in and you will have a 90% extraction ridge. Peachy, no money after you bought it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I think actually it's probably about time to wrap it all up. I'd like to thank you both very much indeed for really good presentations, handling the technology and fielding all these questions that we've been throwing at you. I just like to remind everybody else that we have another webinar on the 14th of December, which will be focusing on ewe management, and we're lucky enough to have Kate Phillips to lead that discussion for us. But without further ado, I'd just like to thank you again very much for all your contributions.